The blood wouldn't come out. Lydia Chen scrubbed harder at the crimson stain spreading across her waitressing uniform, her hands shaking as cold water ran pink down the diner's cracked porcelain sink. The customer who'd thrown his coffee mug at her had cut her forehead when it shattered, and now she looked like she'd been in a bar fight instead of just trying to make tips. She couldn't afford to go home and change. She needed every hour of her double shift. The bathroom door creaked open behind her. "We're closed for cleaning," she said without looking up, dabbing at the stain with rough brown paper towels. "I'm not here for the facilities." The voice made her wolf go absolutely still. Deep, commanding, with that particular resonance that marked an alpha of significant power. Lydia's reflection in the mirror showed her own wide brown eyes and the man standing behind her, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that probably cost more than she made in 6 months. Matthias Blackwood. The Alpha King of the North American Werewolf Council. Mr. Blackwood. She turned slowly, keeping her eyes downcast in automatic deference. What was the most powerful werewolf on the continent doing in Ruby's diner at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday? "I'm sorry, the bathroom really is. I came to speak with you, Miss Chen." Her stomach dropped. Council business. They'd found out about Emma's incident at school, about her daughter shifting in front of human children. Lydia's mind raced through excuses, explanations, desperate pleas. "I have a proposition for you." That wasn't what she'd expected. Lydia raised her eyes to meet his, steel gray, unreadable. "I don't understand." "You're struggling." It wasn't a question. His gaze took in her stained uniform, the dark circles under her eyes, the way she unconsciously touched her neck where her heat-suppressant patch should be but wasn't. Single mother, working multiple jobs, living paycheck to paycheck. Your daughter needs stability. Heat flooded Lydia's cheeks. "Emma and I are fine. Your daughter shifted at school today." The words hit like a physical blow. "She's just 6. She's still learning control. In front of human children." Matthias stepped closer, not threatening but impossibly present. "The council has been informed. Usually, that means relocation. New identities. Starting over with nothing." Lydia's knees nearly buckled. They'd lose everything. Again. "However," Matthias continued, "I'm prepared to offer you an alternative." "What kind of alternative?" The words came out as a whisper. "Marriage." Lydia blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "A marriage of convenience. You would become my wife, stepmother to my daughter Sophia. In return, Emma receives the best education, medical care, and the protection of my pack. No more council interference. No more struggling to make ends meet." She stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "You want to marry me?" "A complete stranger." "Not quite a stranger. I've been watching you for weeks." The admission sent a chill down her spine. "Watching me?" "My daughter has been asking to come here every week since her mother died. She sits in that corner booth and watches you work. Yesterday was the first time she's shown interest in anything since the funeral." Lydia's gaze drifted through the bathroom's small window to the dining area, where she could see a small figure with dark hair hunched in the corner booth Matthias referenced. The little girl who never spoke, who just ordered chocolate milk and sat quietly for an hour before leaving with her nanny. "Sophia chose you," Matthias said quietly. "When I finally asked her why she wanted to keep coming here, she wrote on her notepad, 'The nice lady who doesn't look scared of the sad little girl.'" Lydia's throat tightened. Emma had noticed Sophia weeks ago, had wanted to go talk to her. Lydia had watched them stealing glances at each other across the diner, two lonely children recognizing something in each other. "She hasn't spoken since her mother died 2 years ago," Matthias continued. "Selective mutism, the doctors call it. But she responds to you. Yesterday, when you brought Emma to work because your sitter cancelled, Sophia smiled for the first time in months watching your daughter color at the counter." "This is insane." Lydia turned back to the mirror, trying to process what he was saying. "You can't just marry someone because your daughter likes them. I can do whatever I want. I'm the Alpha King. There was no arrogance in the statement, just fact. The question is whether you can afford to refuse. The crumpled eviction notice in her locker seemed to burn through the metal door. 3 days to come up with $1,200 or she and Emma would be on the street. Her heat suppressants were down to a 4-day supply with no money for refills. Emma's school had made it clear that one more incident would mean expulsion. What would you get out of it? She asked. A mother for my daughter. Someone she's already drawn to. And you? What do you want from a wife? His reflection met hers in the mirror. Nothing you're not willing to give. This would be a business arrangement, Miss Chen. Separate rooms, separate lives. Your only obligation would be to Sophia. Lydia's hands gripped the sink's edge. I need time to think. You have until tomorrow evening. That's when the council meets to discuss Emma's situation. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Miss Chen, I've watched you with your daughter. You're exactly what Sophia needs. And Emma deserves better than this. His gesture encompassed the dingy bathroom, her stained uniform, the exhaustion that had become her constant companion. After he left, Lydia stared at her reflection for a long moment. In the dining area, she could hear Emma's laugh as she helped clear tables, could see Sophia still sitting quietly in her booth. 2 broken families. 2 desperate parents. She thought about the eviction notice, about Emma's tears when the other children called her a freak, about the way Sophia's eyes had lit up yesterday when Emma had shyly waved at her. Maybe desperation and hope weren't so different after all. The next evening, Lydia Chen walked into the most expensive restaurant in the city wearing her best dress, a simple black number from a thrift store, and told the most powerful werewolf in North America that she would marry him. For their daughters, she told herself. For their daughters. Chapter 2. The Blackwood estate stretched before them like something from a movie, all stone and glass and perfectly manicured lawns that probably cost more to maintain than Lydia used to make in a year. As the hired car wound up the circular drive, Emma pressed her face to the window, mouth hanging open. Mama, is that really where we're going to live? Lydia's throat was too tight to answer. 3 days ago, she'd been scrubbing blood from her uniform in a diner bathroom. Now she was staring at a mansion that belonged in architectural magazines, with its soaring windows and ivy-covered walls that spoke of old money and older power. The car stopped in front of massive oak doors. Before Lydia could reach for the handle, the door was opened by a man in his 50s wearing what was clearly a uniform, though it looked more expensive than her wedding dress. Mrs. Blackwood, he said with a slight bow. I'm James, the house manager. Welcome home. Mrs. Blackwood. The name felt foreign on her tongue when she tried to thank him. Everything felt foreign, the marble foyer that echoed their footsteps, the crystal chandelier overhead, the oil paintings of stern-faced wolves that seemed to judge her from gilded frames. Where's Daddy? Emma whispered, suddenly shy in the face of such overwhelming luxury. Mr. Blackwood is in meetings, James explained kindly. He asked me to show you to your rooms and let you know he'll join you for dinner. Their rooms. Plural. Lydia had known the marriage was in name only, but seeing the separate wings of the house made it feel more real somehow. Emma's room was a little girl's dream, pale pink walls, a canopy bed that could fit 3 children, and enough toys to stock a small store. But it was the window that made Emma gasp. It overlooked gardens that seemed to stretch forever, with a playground visible in the distance. This is mine. Emma breathed. All yours, miss, James confirmed. Mr. Blackwood had it designed especially for you. Lydia's chest tightened. Matthias had put thought into this, real consideration for a 6-year-old girl he barely knew. It made the business arrangement feel more complicated somehow. Her own room was down the hall, elegant and spacious, with a sitting area and a bathroom larger than their entire old apartment. It was beautiful and impersonal, like a luxury hotel suite. Through the connecting door, she could see what was clearly meant to be the master bedroom, currently empty. Where does Sophia sleep? Lydia asked as she began unpacking Emma's stuffed animals. James's expression grew careful. Miss Sophia's room is in the east wing, near Mr. Blackwood's study. She prefers it there. Something in his tone made Lydia pause, but Emma was already pulling her toward the window to show her the horses in the distant pasture, and the moment passed. It was while she was hanging up Emma's clothes, so few of them in the massive walk-in closet, that she heard it. Soft footsteps in the hallway, then silence. When she looked out, she caught a glimpse of dark hair disappearing around the corner. Sophia. I'm going to explore a little, she told Emma, who was busy arranging her stuffed animals on the enormous bed. The east wing felt different from the rest of the house. Quieter, somehow. More lived in. The hallway was lined with family photos, Matthias looking younger and less guarded, always with a woman whose smile could light up rooms. Sophia as a baby, a toddler, then suddenly the photos stopped. 2 years ago, Lydia realized. When Sophia's mother died. She found the little girl's room at the end of the hall, the door cracked open. Sophia sat on her bed, a more modest affair than Emma's elaborate setup, with a notebook in her lap, drawing. Lydia knocked softly. Hi, Sophia. I'm Lydia. We met at the diner. Dark eyes, so much like her father's, looked up briefly before returning to the notebook. Is it okay if I come in? A tiny nod. Sophia's room was smaller than Emma's, but it felt more personal. And everywhere Lydia looked, there were photos of the same woman from the hallway photos. On the nightstand, the dresser, even a large portrait above the bed. The woman had been beautiful, elegant in a way Lydia knew she'd never be, with the kind of natural grace that came from being born into this world. She was very pretty, Lydia said softly, settling carefully on the edge of the bed. Your mama. Sophia's pencil stilled. You know, Emma has pictures of her daddy all over her room back home. Sometimes it helps to have them close. A small sound, barely audible. Sophia was trying not to cry. It's okay to miss her, Lydia continued. It's okay to want to keep her close. I just want you to know that I'm not here to take her place. Nobody could do that. Sophia looked up then, really looked at her. After a long moment, she held out her notebook. On the page was a drawing of the diner. Lydia behind the counter, Emma at a table with crayons, and in the corner booth, a small figure with dark hair. Below it, in careful 7-year-old handwriting, the nice lady and the girl who colors. That's beautiful, Lydia said, throat tight. You're a wonderful artist. For the first time, Sophia almost smiled. I should let you get settled, Lydia said, starting to rise. Sophia grabbed her wrist, then quickly let go, but not before pointing to something under her pillow. When she pulled it out, Lydia's blood ran cold. It was a piece of expensive stationery, folded neatly. In elegant script, it read, Your new mommy won't last long. Sophia, who gave you this? The little girl shrugged, but her eyes were frightened. Have there been others? A nod. Can you show me? Sophia opened her nightstand drawer and pulled out 3 more notes. Each one more threatening than the last. She doesn't belong here. Omegas don't make good mothers. Ask your daddy what happened to the last one who tried to replace your mama. Lydia's hands shook as she read them. Someone in this house, someone with access to a 7-year-old's bedroom, was targeting her through Sophia. We need to tell your daddy about these. Sophia shook her head violently, grabbed Lydia's arm. Why not, sweetheart? Sophia picked up her pencil and wrote quickly, He'll send you away. The words hit like a physical blow. Is that what you think? That if there's trouble, I'll leave? Sophia nodded, tears finally spilling over. Oh, honey. Lydia pulled the little girl into her arms, surprised when Sophia melted against her. I'm not going anywhere. But we need to figure out who's doing this and why. A knock at the door made them both jump. Lydia? Are you in here? Matthias's voice. Lydia quickly folded the notes and slipped them into her pocket as he appeared in the doorway. I was just getting to know Sophia, she said, hoping her voice sounded normal. His expression softened as he took in the scene, his daughter curled against Lydia's side, both of them looking up at him with matching expressions of wariness. Dinner's ready, he said. I thought we could eat in the family dining room tonight. More casual. The family dining room was still 3 times the size of Lydia's old kitchen, but it felt warmer somehow. Emma chattered excitedly about her room, the horses, the playground, while Sophia ate quietly beside her. Every so often, Lydia caught the little girl stealing glances at Emma, as if memorizing her. How was the move? Matthias asked. James said the unpacking went smoothly. Everything's beautiful, Lydia said carefully. You've been very generous. Emma seems to be settling in well. As if summoned by her name, Emma chose that moment to accidentally knock over her water glass. The liquid spread across the antique table, and she looked horrified. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Before anyone could move, the spilled water began to steam. Not just steam, it was actually boiling. Matthias went very still. Emma, take a deep breath for me. I didn't mean to. Emma's eyes were wide with panic, and now the water was definitely boiling, bubbling against the wood. Lydia reached for her daughter, but Matthias was faster. He knelt beside Emma's chair, his voice calm and steady. You're okay. You're safe. Just breathe with me. Emma followed his breathing, and slowly the water stopped boiling. But the damage was done, there were scorch marks on the table, and the smell of heated metal hung in the air. How did she do that? Lydia whispered. Matthias exchanged a look with her over Emma's head. We'll discuss it later. The rest of dinner passed in tense quiet. Even Emma seemed subdued, shooting worried glances between the adults. When James came to clear the dishes, he paused at the damaged table but said nothing. After the girls were settled for the night, Matthias found Lydia in her sitting room, staring out at the gardens. About Emma, she began. She's manifesting alpha abilities, he said without preamble. At 6 years old, that's unusual. Is it dangerous? Not dangerous. But it will draw attention. He moved to stand beside her at the window. The pack elders will want to evaluate her. Test her potential. Test her how? Nothing harmful, he said quickly. But they'll want to understand what she's capable of. A 6-year-old Omega manifesting alpha-level abilities is unprecedented. Lydia felt suddenly cold. Will they want to take her away? Not if she's under my protection. Which she is. His voice was firm, but she heard the underlying worry. But there will be questions. Politics. Speaking of politics, Lydia said, pulling the notes from her pocket. Someone left these for Sophia. Matthias read them in silence, his expression growing darker with each one. When he finished, the paper was crumpled in his fist. Where did you find these? Under her pillow. There have been others. She watched his face carefully. Matthias, what happened to Sophia's mother? The question hung between them like a physical thing. Finally, he said, Elena died in a car accident. Or that's what the official report says. But you don't believe it. Elena was one of the most careful drivers I knew. She was also. He paused, choosing his words carefully. She'd been receiving threats before she died. Anonymous notes, mysterious accidents that weren't quite accidents. Lydia's stomach dropped. Someone killed her. I could never prove it. But yes, I believe someone in my inner circle murdered my wife. And now they're targeting me. It appears so. His voice was grim. But why leave the notes where Sophia would find them? Unless. Unless what? Unless they're not meant to scare you away. Unless they're meant as a warning. He looked at her then, really looked at her. Someone might be trying to protect you by telling you what happened to Elena. The possibility hung between them, both terrifying and oddly hopeful. Tomorrow I'll introduce you to the pack leadership, Matthias said. You need to know who you're dealing with. Are you sure that's wise? If someone in your inner circle is a killer, then it's better to know who they are. His smile was sharp, predatory. Besides, they'll want to meet the Omega who managed to snare the Alpha King. And after tonight, they'll definitely want to meet Emma. Will she be safe? She'll be safe, he promised. You both will. I failed Elena, but I won't fail you. As he left her alone in the elegant sitting room, Lydia couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just signed Emma up for something far more dangerous than poverty. In the distance, she could hear Sophia practicing piano, a haunting melody that seemed to echo through the vast house like a warning. Tomorrow, she'd meet the pack that might contain her daughter's future killer. Tonight, she'd hold tight to the promise of a man who'd already lost one family to these same shadows. The notes lay scattered on her coffee table, elegant threats in expensive ink. As she gathered them up, one phrase caught her eye again: ask your daddy what happened to the last one who tried to replace your mama. Not the last one who married him. The last one who tried to replace her. Which meant Elena might not have been the first to die. Lydia locked her door that night, and for the first time since accepting Matthias's proposal, wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. Chapter 3. The screaming started at 3 a.m. Lydia bolted upright in her bed, immediately recognizing the sound of a child in terror. She threw on her robe and ran toward the sound, meeting Matthias in the hallway as he rushed from his own room. His hair was disheveled, his chest bare, and for a moment she was distracted by the network of scars across his skin before another scream refocused her attention. Sophia, they said in unison. The little girl was thrashing in her bed, tears streaming down her face, caught in the grip of what was clearly a violent nightmare. Matthias reached for her first, but she flinched away from him, still trapped in sleep. Let me try, Lydia said softly. She sat on the edge of the bed and began humming, an old lullaby her grandmother had sung to her, something in a language she'd never bothered to learn. Her hand smoothed over Sophia's dark hair, and gradually the child's breathing began to slow. You're safe, Lydia whispered. Whatever you're seeing, it can't hurt you. You're safe in your room, in your bed, with people who love you. Sophia's eyes fluttered open, still glazed with sleep and terror. She looked at Lydia for a long moment, then said in a voice rusty from disuse, Mommy says the Silver Lady is coming back. The words hit the room like a physical blow. Matthias went rigid beside her, and Lydia felt her own breath catch. Sophia? Matthias's voice was barely a whisper. What did you say, baby? But Sophia was already sinking back into sleep, the words apparently wrung from her by the nightmare. Within minutes, her breathing was deep and even. She spoke, Lydia breathed. More than that. Matthias's face was pale. The Silver Lady, that's what Elena used to call her grandmother. She died when Elena was young, but Elena always said she could still see her sometimes. Especially when danger was coming. You think Sophia can see her mother? I think Sophia may have inherited gifts we didn't know existed in our bloodlines. His eyes met hers in the dim light of the bedroom. Gifts that could make her as much of a target as Emma. The next morning brought an unwelcome surprise in the form of 3 black cars pulling up the circular drive. Matthias watched from his study window, his expression grim. The pack elders, he told Lydia. They've called for Luna trials. Luna trials? Pack law. Any woman who marries an alpha must prove her worthiness to be Luna. Usually it's a formality, but... He gestured toward the cars. Given your status as an outsider Omega, they want to make sure you can handle the position. Lydia felt her stomach clench. What kind of trials? 3 tests. Combat, to prove you can defend the pack. Management, to prove you can lead it. And bloodline verification, to confirm there are no genetic issues that would affect future heirs. Future heirs? Heat flooded her cheeks. But we're not. I mean, this isn't a real marriage. The pack doesn't know that. His voice was careful. As far as they're concerned, this is a traditional mating. Which means they expect traditional results. Before she could ask what he meant by that, James appeared in the doorway. Mr. Blackwood? The elders are requesting an immediate audience. The pack elders were exactly what Lydia had expected, 3 ancient werewolves who radiated power and disapproval in equal measure. They sat in Matthias's formal living room like they owned it, which, given their obvious influence, they might as well have. Lydia Chen, the center elder, a woman with steel-gray hair and cold blue eyes, spoke her name like it tasted unpleasant. You understand why we're here. To determine if I'm suitable to be Luna. Lydia kept her voice steady despite her racing heart. An Omega Luna is unprecedented, said the elder to the left, a man whose scars spoke of countless battles. The position requires strength, leadership, the ability to make difficult decisions for the good of the pack. With respect, Lydia said, being Omega doesn't mean being weak. The third elder, younger than the others but no less intimidating, smiled without warmth. We shall see. The trials begin immediately. The first trial was combat, held in the estate's private gymnasium. Lydia faced off against Derek, Matthias's beta, who'd made his disapproval of her clear from the moment she'd arrived. He was bigger, stronger, and had decades more training. She lasted exactly 30 seconds before he had her pinned. Again, called the lead elder. This time, Lydia lasted 45 seconds. Again. On the third round, something shifted. Maybe it was the memory of Emma's terrified face when the other children called her a freak. Maybe it was thinking about Sophia's nightmares, or the threatening notes, or the years of scraping and struggling and being dismissed because she was an Omega single mother. When Derek lunged for her, instead of trying to match his strength, she used his momentum against him. She was smaller, faster, and desperate in a way he couldn't match. When the dust settled, Derek was on his back and Lydia was standing over him, breathing hard but victorious. The elders exchanged surprised glances. The second trial was pack management, a complex scenario involving resource allocation, territorial disputes, and internal politics. They presented her with a 3-hour written examination followed by verbal questioning that felt more like an interrogation. But Lydia had spent years juggling multiple jobs, managing tight budgets, and making impossible decisions about what Emma needed most. Pack politics weren't so different from diner politics, just with higher stakes. When she suggested an innovative solution to a decades-old territorial dispute, one that would benefit all parties while strengthening the pack's overall position, even the stern lead elder looked impressed. Interesting approach, the woman admitted grudgingly. Unorthodox, but sound. It was the bloodline verification that changed everything. This is a simple ritual, the youngest elder explained as they gathered in Matthias's private study. We'll take a small sample of your blood and perform a genetic analysis. Just to confirm there are no hereditary issues that could affect the pack bloodline. Lydia nodded, though something about the elder's expression made her uneasy. What kind of issues? Incompatible genetics, recessive disorders, bloodline dilution. The elder pricked Lydia's finger with a silver needle and let 3 drops of her blood fall onto what looked like an ancient piece of parchment. Nothing to worry about. The moment her blood hit the parchment, it began to glow. Not just glow, it blazed with silver light so bright Lydia had to shield her eyes. The elders stepped back in shock, and she heard one of them whisper something in a language she didn't recognize. What's happening? Matthias demanded. The lead elder stared at the parchment as if it were a live bomb. The silver wolf gene. We haven't seen it manifest in over 300 years. What does that mean? Lydia asked. It means, said the youngest elder, his voice filled with awe and fear, that your daughter may be the most powerful werewolf born in centuries. And that, added the scarred elder grimly, makes her incredibly dangerous to our enemies. The elders left immediately after, muttering among themselves and shooting Lydia looks that mixed respect with concern. When their cars disappeared down the drive, Matthias turned to her with an expression she couldn't read. Silver Wolf, he said quietly. I should have suspected. What aren't you telling me? Silver wolves are legendary. The original werewolf bloodline, before it was diluted by generations of interbreeding. They were said to be able to command other wolves, to heal mortal wounds, to see across the veil between life and death. That's impossible. Is it? Emma boiled water with her emotions yesterday. Today, my daughter spoke for the first time in 2 years after you comforted her. And last night, she claimed to see her dead mother. Lydia sank into a chair, overwhelmed. What does this mean for Emma? For us? It means we have bigger problems than I thought. Matthias began pacing. Every pack in North America will want to either claim her or eliminate her. The old bloodlines, the ones who've held power for centuries, won't want to see it threatened by a 6-year-old girl. A knock at the door interrupted them. Come in, Matthias called. To Lydia's surprise, it was Dr. Victoria Sterling, the elegant pack doctor who'd made her disapproval clear at every interaction. But now she looked nervous, almost frightened. I need to speak with you both, she said. It's about the threats against Sophia. And about Elena. Matthias went very still. What about Elena? Victoria closed the door behind her and turned to face them both. I was Elena's best friend. And I'm the one who's been leaving the protective wards around Sophia's room. The notes? Lydia asked. You've been leaving those threatening notes? Not threatening. Warning. Victoria's voice was tight. Elena received similar notes before she died. I wrote them to try to protect her, to make her understand the danger she was in. But she thought they were threats, and she pulled away from everyone who tried to help her. Help her with what? Matthias's voice was dangerous. The pack elders discovered Elena was pregnant again. But the bloodline verification revealed something they couldn't accept. The child she carried had the silver wolf gene. Lydia's blood turned to ice. They killed her to prevent the birth. They arranged the accident, yes. Made it look like she lost control of her car. Victoria's hands shook as she spoke. I've been trying to protect Sophia ever since, placing wards to mask any manifestation of power. But now that Emma's here, now that we know Lydia carries the gene, they'll come for both girls, Matthias finished grimly. Which elders? His voice was deadly quiet. I don't know which ones specifically. But I overheard conversations, fragments. There's a faction within the council that believes silver wolves are too dangerous to exist. They call themselves the purists. A crash from upstairs made them all freeze. Then Emma's voice, high and frightened, Mama. Mama, something's wrong with Sophia. They found both girls in Sophia's room. Emma was pressed against the wall, eyes wide with terror, while Sophia stood in the center of the room surrounded by floating objects, books, picture frames, even her heavy wooden chair hovered 3 feet off the ground. And Sophia's eyes were glowing silver. The silver lady says they're coming, Sophia said in that same rusty voice. She says we have to run. As if summoned by her words, the sound of cars reached them from outside. Multiple engines, moving fast up the drive. Matthias looked out the window and cursed. 6 cars. Armed men. This isn't a social visit. The purists. Victoria whispered. Has to be. They must have learned about the bloodline results. He turned to Lydia, and she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before, not the cold calculation of a business arrangement, but the fierce protectiveness of a mate defending his family. Take the girls and go. There's a safe room in the basement, behind the wine cellar. Victoria knows where it is. What about you? I'm going to buy you time. Before she could protest, he was gone, shifting into his wolf form before he even cleared the doorway. Through the window, she could see him racing toward the approaching cars, a massive black wolf moving with lethal intent. Come on, Victoria urged, gathering both girls. We need to move now. As they ran through the house, Sophia's powers gradually subsided, the floating objects settling back into place. But her eyes remained that eerie silver, and she kept whispering things that made no sense. The silver lady says Daddy's strong, but there are too many. She says the little girl who colors needs to wake up her wolf. What does she mean? Lydia asked as they reached the basement. Victoria's face was pale. I think she means Emma needs to manifest her silver wolf abilities. But she's only 6, it could kill her. Outside, they could hear the sound of fighting, snarls, gunshots, breaking glass. Matthias was holding them off, but for how long? Mama, Emma said in a small voice. I can feel them. The angry men. They want to hurt us. No one's going to hurt you, baby. They hurt Sophia's mommy. Emma's eyes were beginning to glow with that same silver light. They want to hurt us too. Emma, no, Lydia said urgently. You're too young. The silver lady says I'm not. Emma's voice was changing, becoming somehow older, more certain. She says it's time to protect our pack. The basement lights exploded in a shower of sparks as Emma's power erupted. But instead of the dangerous, uncontrolled manifestation Lydia feared, what emerged was something beautiful and terrifying, a column of silver light that seemed to pulse with ancient power. Through the walls, through the floors, they could feel it spreading. Every wolf on the estate would sense it, would feel the call of the silver bloodline awakening. Including their enemies. Oh God, Victoria whispered. Every supernatural in a 100-mile radius just felt that. We've just painted a target on all of us. As if to prove her point, the sound of fighting above intensified. More cars were arriving, and through the small basement window, Lydia could see lights, dozens of them, surrounding the estate. They weren't just dealing with the pack elders anymore. Emma's awakening had called every enemy the Blackwoods had ever made. And somewhere in the silver light that still emanated from her 6-year-old daughter, Lydia thought she could see the ghost of a woman with kind eyes, standing protectively behind both girls. Elena. Still fighting to protect her family, even from beyond the grave. The question was whether any of them would survive long enough for that protection to matter. Chapter 4. The harvest moon hung fat and golden over the Blackwood estate, casting everything in an otherworldly glow. It was Emma's first full moon run with the pack, and Lydia could barely contain her anxiety as she watched her daughter stand with the other children, waiting for the transformation to begin. She'll be fine, Matthias said quietly beside her, but she could hear the tension in his own voice. The pack will protect her. 2 weeks had passed since the attack by the purists. Matthias had managed to drive them off, but not before 3 pack members were injured and the estate security was compromised. Since then, they'd been living in a state of heightened alert, guards patrolling the grounds, magical wards reinforced daily, and everyone on edge waiting for the next strike. The only bright spot had been Sophia's continued recovery. The little girl was speaking more each day, though she still claimed to see her mother's ghost regularly. Sterling assured them it was normal for children with psychic abilities, but Lydia couldn't shake the feeling that Elena's spirit was trying to warn them about something. Mama, look! Emma's excited voice broke through her worries. Around them, the other wolves were beginning to shift. The transformation was always beautiful to watch, the fluid melting of human form into wolf, the graceful emergence of fur and fang. Emma stood in the center of it all, her face screwed up in concentration. I can feel it starting, she called out. But what started wasn't like the others. Instead of the smooth transition Lydia expected, Emma's transformation erupted. Silver light blazed from her small form, so bright it turned the night into day. The other wolves stumbled back, whining and covering their eyes. Even Matthias had to shield his face. When the light faded, Lydia's breath caught in her throat. Where her 6-year-old daughter had stood was a wolf unlike anything she'd ever seen. Emma was massive, easily twice the size of any adult in the pack, with silver fur that seemed to move like liquid mercury. Her eyes blazed with that same silver fire, and when she threw back her head and howled, every supernatural creature within miles felt the call. Including those they'd hoped never to see again. Dear God, Victoria breathed from somewhere behind them. She's not just Silver Wolf. She's the Silver Wolf. The first in over 500 years. What does that mean? Lydia demanded, but before Victoria could answer, the forest around them erupted with answering howls. Not from their pack. From things that had no business being on Blackwood land. Shadow Collective, Matthias snarled, already beginning his own shift. They felt Emma's call. Everyone, defensive positions. But it was too late. Dark shapes poured out of the tree line, wolves, but wrong somehow. Their fur was patchy and gray, their eyes glowed red instead of gold, and they moved with the jerky, unnatural gait of creatures that had been changed by something other than moonlight. Rogues, Derek shouted, rallying the pack warriors. Form a perimeter around the children. The battle was swift and vicious. The rogues fought with the desperation of creatures with nothing to lose, throwing themselves at the pack defenders with suicidal fury. But they weren't trying to win. Lydia realized with growing horror that they were trying to create chaos. A distraction. The children, she screamed, but her voice was lost in the sounds of combat. She ran toward where Emma had been standing, but found only empty space. Sophia, who'd been watching from the porch with her nanny, was gone too. Matthias. Lydia's wolf senses picked up unfamiliar scents leading away from the house. They have the girls. The Alpha King's roar of rage shook the ground. In his massive black wolf form, he tore through the remaining rogues like tissue paper, but it was too late. By the time the last attacker fell, Emma and Sophia had vanished into the night. How? Matthias demanded as he shifted back to human form, blood streaming from a dozen wounds. How did they get past our defenses? Past the wards? Derek limped over, his own injuries evident. It had to be someone on the inside. Someone who knew our patrol schedules, our weak points. Someone we trust, Victoria added grimly. Matthias's face was stone as he surveyed his pack. Gather everyone. Now. I want a full accounting of where every member was during the attack. As the pack assembled in the Great Hall, Lydia found herself studying each face, looking for signs of guilt or deception. These people had welcomed her, some reluctantly, others warmly, but one of them had betrayed her daughters. The Shadow Collective doesn't just kidnap children for sport, Matthias told the assembled pack. They've been hunting silver wolves for decades, believing that eliminating the bloodline will bring peace between the supernatural factions. Peace through genocide, Victoria spat. Who would have access to our patrol schedules? Matthias continued. Who knew about tonight's moon run? Who could have disabled the wards without setting off alarms? The questions hung in the air like accusations. Lydia watched as pack members looked suspiciously at one another, the unity they'd always shared beginning to crack under the weight of betrayal. It was Sophia's nanny, Mrs. Chen, who broke first. I saw someone near the ward stones yesterday, she said hesitantly. Someone who shouldn't have been there. Who? Matthias's voice was deadly quiet. Mrs. Chen looked terrified, but she pointed with a shaking hand. Derek. I saw Derek tampering with the Eastern Ward. All eyes turned to the beta, who stood perfectly still in the face of the accusation. For a moment, Lydia thought Mrs. Chen was wrong. Derek looked genuinely shocked by the allegation. Then she saw his hand drift toward the weapon concealed beneath his jacket. Derek, Matthias said, his voice filled with betrayal and rage. Tell me she's lying. Derek's shoulders sagged in defeat. I can't do that, Matthias. The admission hit the room like a physical blow. Pack members stepped away from Derek, horror and disbelief written on their faces. Why? Matthias's question was barely human. Elena trusted you. I trusted you. You were my second in command. Because Elena was going to get us all killed. Derek's composure finally cracked. Do you have any idea what the other supernatural factions were planning? The vampires, the fae, the demon courts, they were all mobilizing against us because of one unborn silver wolf child. So you killed her. I arranged for her accident, yes. I thought if the child died with her, the threat would pass. But then Sophia started showing abilities, and I realized the gene was already in our bloodline. Derek looked around the room, his eyes desperate. Don't you see? The silver wolf isn't a gift, it's a curse. Every time one manifests, it brings war. And now? Lydia found her voice, though it shook with fury. What about Emma and Sophia? Derek met her eyes, and she saw genuine regret there. The Shadow Collective believes the same thing I do, that eliminating the Silver Wolf bloodline is the only way to prevent supernatural war. But they're willing to be more permanent in their solution. You gave them my daughters. The words came out as a growl, and Lydia felt her own wolf rising to the surface, silver light beginning to emanate from her skin. I gave them a chance for peace, Derek insisted. The girls will be treated humanely, but they can never be allowed to reach full power. Matthias moved so fast Derek didn't have time to reach for his weapon. One moment the beta was standing, the next he was on his back with Matthias's hand around his throat. Where are they? Matthias snarled. Derek gasped for air. Even if I knew, I wouldn't tell you. This is bigger than your family, Matthias. Bigger than our pack. Wrong answer. Before Matthias could do something that would end Derek permanently, Lydia grabbed his arm. Wait. He's more useful alive. Lydia. Think about it. He's been working with them for years. He knows their methods, their hideouts, their plans. She looked down at Derek with cold fury. And he's going to help us get our daughters back. Derek laughed bitterly. You think I'll betray the collective? They're trying to save the supernatural world from another war. You already betrayed them, Victoria said quietly from across the room. By caring about those girls at all. I've been watching you, Derek. Every time Emma smiled at you, every time Sophia let you help with her homework. You cared about them despite yourself. Derek's expression flickered, and Lydia saw the crack in his resolve. They're 6 and 7 years old, she said softly. Whatever threat you think they pose, they're still just little girls who are probably terrified right now. Help us bring them home. For a long moment, Derek was silent. Then, the collective has a compound in the mountains. 40 miles north of here. But Lydia. He looked at her with something like pity. You need to understand what you're walking into. They won't just kill Emma and Sophia. They'll make examples of them. Public executions to show the supernatural world what happens to those who threaten the balance. Matthias released Derek's throat and stepped back. How long do we have? The new moon is in 3 days. That's when they'll do it. 3 days to track them down, infiltrate a fortified compound, and rescue 2 children from supernatural terrorists. Matthias looked around the room at his remaining pack members. Who's with me? Every hand went up. This isn't pack business anymore, Derek warned. The collective has treaties with every major supernatural faction. If you attack them, you'll be branded rogues yourselves. Then we'll be rogues, Lydia said firmly. I don't care about treaties or politics. I care about my daughters. As the pack began planning their assault, Matthias pulled Lydia aside. There's something else you need to know, he said quietly. About the compound, about what we'll face there. Tell me. The Shadow Collective isn't just made up of rogues. They have vampires, fey warriors, even some demon spawn. And they've been preparing for this moment, for the return of the Silver Wolf, for decades. Are you trying to talk me out of going? No. His hand cupped her face, and she was startled by the tenderness in his touch. I'm trying to tell you that I can't lose you too. The admission hung between them, changing everything and nothing all at once. This was supposed to be a business arrangement, she whispered. It was. But somewhere between watching you comfort my daughter and seeing you stand up to pack elders and rogues alike. He trailed off, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. This stopped being about convenience a long time ago. Matthias. I know. Wrong time, wrong place. But if we don't make it out of this alive, I needed you to know. He leaned his forehead against hers. You're not just Emma's mother anymore, and you're not just Sophia's stepmother. You're my maid in every way that matters." Before she could respond, Victoria approached them. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but we've got a problem. Derek's right about the treaties. If we attack the collective directly, every supernatural faction will consider it an act of war against the balance they've maintained for centuries." "Then we don't attack directly," Lydia said, stepping back from Matthias though her heart was still racing. "We infiltrate. We get in, get the girls, and get out without triggering a supernatural war. How do you propose we do that?" Lydia looked around the room at the assembled pack, at Derek still restrained on the floor, at the family photos on the walls that included Elena's smiling face. At Victoria, who'd been trying to protect them all along. An idea began to form. Derek said they were going to make examples of the girls. Public executions to show the supernatural world what happens to silver wolves. She met Matthias's eyes. "What if we gave them a bigger example to focus on?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if the silver wolf herself walked into their compound and surrendered?" "Absolutely not," Matthias said immediately. "Think about it. They want to eliminate the silver wolf bloodline, but Emma's just a child. I'm the one carrying the gene that created her. If I offer myself in exchange for both girls, they'll kill you and keep the children anyway. Not if we make it a public spectacle. Not if representatives from all the major factions are watching. They'll have to honor the terms of the exchange or risk looking weak." Victoria was nodding slowly. It could work. The collective prides itself on supernatural law and order. They wouldn't break their word in front of the vampire lords and fey courts. "It's too dangerous," Matthias insisted. "Everything about this situation is dangerous." Lydia touched his arm. "But this way, at least Emma and Sophia have a chance." "And what about your chance?" She didn't answer, because they all knew the truth. Once she was in the collective's hands, her chances were minimal. But her daughter's chances would be everything. "There's one more thing," Derek spoke up from the floor. "About the compound. About why they chose that location." "What about it?" Derek's expression was grim. "It's built on a convergence point, where multiple ley lines intersect. They've been channeling that energy for decades, storing it for one purpose. Which is a ritual to permanently sever the connection between silver wolves and their power. They don't just want to kill Emma and Sophia. They want to make it so no silver wolf can ever manifest again." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "How long would such a ritual take?" Matthias asked. "Hours. And it has to be performed during the new moon, when the barrier between worlds is thinnest." "Then we have our timeline," Lydia said with finality. "We get to that compound before the new moon, and we stop them from performing their ritual. And if we can't?" She looked around the room, at the pack that had become her family, at the man who'd become so much more than a convenient husband, at the photos of the daughter she'd failed to save 2 years ago. "Then we make sure the last thing the Shadow Collective sees is what happens when you threaten a silver wolf's children." Outside, storm clouds were gathering on the horizon, and somewhere in the mountains, 2 little girls were waiting for their parents to bring them home. The war for the future of the silver wolf bloodline was about to begin. Chapter 5. The abandoned silver mines carved into Blackrock Mountain looked like the entrance to hell itself, twisted metal supports, collapsed tunnels, and the lingering scent of old blood and older fears. As Lydia crouched behind a boulder with Matthias and the remaining pack members, she could feel the weight of history pressing down on her. "This is where they brought silver wolves to die," Victoria whispered, her face pale in the moonlight. "Hundreds of years ago, when the other supernatural factions decided we were too dangerous to exist." "How fitting that Derek chose this place for his final stand," Matthias growled, his eyes fixed on the mine entrance where armed guards patrolled. They'd been watching the compound for 6 hours, ever since Derek had led them here under armed escort. The betrayal still burned, Derek walking freely among his former packmates while Emma and Sophia were prisoners somewhere in those tunnels. But Lydia had insisted they needed him to get inside, and now she was beginning to wonder if that had been a mistake. "The ritual chamber is deep in the mines," Derek said quietly, his hands bound with silver chains that burned his skin. But Lydia, you need to understand what you're walking into. This isn't just about Emma and Sophia anymore. What do you mean? Derek's expression was haunted. The Shadow Collective didn't just want to eliminate the Silver Wolf bloodline. They wanted to harness it. Use Emma's power to create an army of enhanced werewolves under their control. That's impossible, Matthias said. Not if you have the right psychic conduit to channel the power. Derek looked directly at Lydia. Sophia's abilities aren't just about seeing ghosts. She can create psychic bonds, control the connections between pack members. Combined with Emma's raw power, the implications hit Lydia like a physical blow. They want to use Sophia to control Emma, and Emma's power to control others. An army of supernaturally enhanced soldiers, all bound to the will of the Shadow Collective. Derek's voice was hollow. It's why I originally supported them. I thought if they could control the power instead of destroying it, we could avoid war. But when I saw what they really planned... You developed a conscience? Matthias's voice was cold. I realized I'd made a deal with monsters. A commotion near the mine entrance caught their attention. Guards were moving aside as a figure emerged from the tunnels, tall, pale, with the kind of otherworldly beauty that marked him as something other than werewolf. Vampire Lord, Victoria breathed. High-ranking, from the look of him. The other factions are here for the ritual, Derek confirmed. They want to witness the harnessing of Silver Wolf power. If the collective succeeds tonight, every supernatural government will want to replicate their success. Lydia felt something cold settle in her stomach. This wasn't just about saving her daughters anymore, it was about preventing the creation of supernatural weapons that could reshape the entire paranormal world. How do we get inside without triggering every alarm they have? She asked. Derek was quiet for a long moment. Then, there's another way in. An old mining tunnel that connects to the ritual chamber. But it's unstable, dangerous. More dangerous than walking through the front door. The tunnel goes through the heart of the mountain, past the old execution chambers. The silver residue in the air is so thick it could kill a werewolf who doesn't have natural resistance to it. Lydia understood immediately. But someone with the Silver Wolf gene could survive it. In theory. But Lydia, you've never fully transformed. You've been suppressing your wolf your entire life. If the silver exposure forces a change and you can't control it, I'll die in the tunnels before I reach the girls. Or you'll undergo a transformation so violent it destroys your mind. Matthias grabbed her arm. There has to be another way. There isn't. Lydia looked at the mine entrance, at the guards and supernatural dignitaries gathering for what they thought would be a triumphant ritual. This is what I have to do. I won't let you go alone. You can't come with me. The silver exposure would kill you within minutes. She touched his face, memorizing the feel of his skin. But I need you to create a distraction. Give me time to reach the ritual chamber. And then what? Even if you find them, how do you plan to fight an entire army of supernatural soldiers? Lydia looked at her hands, thinking about the power she'd kept locked away her entire life. The silver light that had manifested when Emma was threatened, the strength that had allowed her to defeat Derek in combat, the instincts that had guided her through every challenge since accepting Matthias's proposal. I stopped pretending to be something I'm not. An hour later, Lydia stood at the entrance to the abandoned mining tunnel, her heart pounding as she breathed in air thick with silver dust. Already she could feel her wolf stirring, responding to the metal that should have been poison but felt instead like coming home. Behind her, she could hear the sounds of Matthias's diversionary attack, explosions, gunfire, the howls of wolves in battle. The plan was simple: draw as many guards as possible away from the interior while she made her way to the ritual chamber. The tunnel was worse than Derek had described. The walls wept silver in places, creating streams of liquid metal that glowed with their own light. The air burned her lungs, and within minutes she was gasping for breath. But instead of weakening her, the exposure seemed to be awakening something that had been dormant her entire life. Her wolf. Not the small, careful creature she'd allowed to surface in moments of extreme stress, but something vast and powerful and silver bright. She could feel it pushing against the mental barriers she'd erected decades ago, demanding release. Not yet, she whispered to herself. Not until I find them. The tunnel branched and curved, leading deeper into the mountain. She passed chambers carved with symbols she didn't recognize, rooms that reeked of old death and older magic. This place had been designed for suffering, and the very walls seemed to remember every scream. It was in one of these chambers that she first heard Emma's voice. "Mama's coming. I can feel her." Lydia's heart leaped, and she quickened her pace, following the sound through increasingly narrow passages. The silver exposure was becoming unbearable, her skin was beginning to glow with an inner light, and she could feel her bones starting to shift. She was transforming whether she wanted to or not. The ritual chamber opened up before her like a cathedral of nightmares. The ceiling soared overhead, supported by pillars carved from living rock. In the center, a circle of silver had been inlaid into the stone floor, and within that circle, Emma and Sophia. Both girls were conscious but restrained, silver chains binding them to metal chairs. Emma's eyes blazed with that familiar silver fire, but Sophia looked different, older somehow, her dark eyes filled with a knowledge no 7-year-old should possess. Around the circle stood representatives from every major supernatural faction. Vampires with their pale perfection, fey lords crackling with wild magic, demon spawn whose forms shifted and blurred at the edges of vision. And at the head of it all, a figure Lydia recognized from Derek's descriptions, the Shadow Collective's leader, a werewolf so old and powerful he barely looked human anymore. "Ah, the Silver Wolf's mother arrives," he said, his voice echoing through the chamber. "How convenient. Now we can begin the binding ritual with the full family present." "Let them go," Lydia said, stepping into the chamber. The moment her feet crossed the threshold, every supernatural in the room turned to stare at her. Because she was glowing. Silver light poured from her skin like moonlight made solid. Her hair had turned the color of starshine, and her eyes blazed with the same power that marked Emma as special. The transformation she'd fought her entire life was finally completing itself, and the result was breathtaking. "Magnificent," breathed the vampire lord. "I haven't seen a silver wolf in full transformation in 3 centuries. And you won't see another for 3 more, the collective leader said. "Guards, restrain her." But when the guards moved forward, something unexpected happened. The silver in the floor, the walls, even the chains binding Emma and Sophia began to resonate, singing with a pure, clear tone that made every supernatural in the room flinch. "Mama!" Emma called out, and her own transformation erupted in response to Lydia's presence. The little girl burst from her restraints as her wolf form exploded outward, not the massive silver beast from the pack grounds, but something even more incredible. Emma's wolf was made of living silver, seeming to flow and shift like liquid mercury given shape and will. "Impossible," someone gasped. "She's not just manifesting silver wolf abilities, she is a silver wolf." But Sophia was changing too. The quiet little girl who'd barely spoken was suddenly surrounded by shimmering air, and Lydia realized she could see the psychic connections in the room like silver threads linking every mind present. "The conduit," the collective leader shouted. "Secure the conduit before she breaks our control." Too late. Sophia's eyes opened, blazing not with silver light but with something deeper, the blue-white glow of pure psychic energy. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of prophecy. "You wanted to use me to control others," she said, her childish voice somehow ancient. "But I choose who I connect to." The silver threads visible in Lydia's enhanced vision suddenly shifted, writhing away from the Shadow Collective members and reaching instead toward Lydia and Emma. The moment those connections formed, Lydia felt her daughter's power merge with her own. The combined force was staggering. Silver light exploded through the chamber, racing along the metal veins in the walls and floor. Every piece of silver in the mountain began to sing, and the sound was like nothing Lydia had ever heard, beautiful and terrible and utterly commanding. The supernatural representatives fell to their knees, their faces filled with awe and terror. Even the ancient collective leader stepped back, his confidence finally cracking. "You're not just silver wolves," he whispered. "You're the silver wolves. The original bloodline, undiluted." "Which means," Sophia said, rising from her broken restraints, "you made a very big mistake trying to hurt my family." What happened next would be talked about in supernatural circles for generations. The silver in the mountain didn't just respond to Lydia and Emma's power, it obeyed it. Veins of liquid metal rose from the floor like living serpents, wrapping around the Shadow Collective members and their allies. But this wasn't just an attack. As the silver touched each supernatural, Lydia could feel their intentions, their memories, their deepest secrets. The vampire lord who'd been planning to replicate their experiments. The demon spawn who'd tortured silver wolves for sport. The fey lord who'd collected the bones of their kind as trophies. And through it all, Derek's voice echoing in her mind, "You have to choose. Save them all, or save your daughters." Lydia looked at Emma, magnificent in her liquid silver form, then at Sophia, who was carefully maintaining the psychic connections that kept them linked. These beings had come here to witness the destruction of the silver wolf bloodline, to see her daughters turned into weapons. Instead, they were about to witness the birth of something new. "I choose my pack," Lydia said, and let her power loose. The silver sang through the mountain, not destroying but changing. Every supernatural touched by it felt their connection to violence and hatred severed, replaced by something else, an overwhelming need to protect the innocent, to shield children from harm, to use their power for healing instead of hurt. When the light faded, the ritual chamber was silent except for the sound of weeping. Not tears of pain, but of release, decades or centuries of cruelty washed away in a moment of silver fire. The Shadow Collective leader looked up at Lydia with eyes that held wonder instead of malice. "What did you do to us?" "I gave you a choice," Lydia said simply. "The same choice I made. Protect children, or lose your power forever. You bound us. I freed you. From the need to hurt others to feel strong." Footsteps echoed through the chamber as Matthias appeared in the entrance, his wolf form magnificent even covered in battle wounds. Behind him came Victoria and the surviving pack members, their faces showing relief and amazement in equal measure. "Is it over?" Matthias asked, shifting back to human form. Lydia looked around the chamber. At the supernatural representatives who were now helping to free Emma and Sophia from the last of their restraints, at the former Shadow Collective members who seemed dazed but no longer hostile, at her daughters who glowed with silver light but were unmistakably, beautifully themselves. "It's over," she said. But even as she spoke, she felt something stirring in the silver veins beneath the mountain. Not malice this time, but something else. A calling. Other voices, other children, reaching out across vast distances with their own desperate needs. The transformation wasn't complete. This was only the beginning. Epilogue, 6 months later ***. The Blackwood estate had been rebuilt, but it was different now. Where once it had been a fortress designed to keep the world out, it had become a sanctuary designed to welcome the lost in. Lydia stood in her office, formerly Matthias's study, reading through the morning's correspondence. Letters from Omega mothers across the continent, all describing the same phenomenon, children manifesting abilities that shouldn't exist, powers that defied every known law of supernatural genetics. A 6-year-old vampire child who could heal with her bite instead of harm. Twin werewolf boys who could communicate with the spirits of the forest. A young fey girl whose illusions had begun creating portals to other dimensions. All of them reaching out to the Silver Luna, as the supernatural community had begun calling her. "Another dozen letters today," Victoria said, entering with a fresh stack of mail. "Word is spreading faster than we anticipated." "Good. That means the children who need help will be able to find us." Lydia set down the letter she'd been reading, a heartbreaking account of a 10-year-old whose empathic abilities had become so overwhelming she'd stopped speaking entirely. "How many are we expecting this week?" 15 new arrivals. The Morrison family from Montana, the Chin twins from California, and the Blackwood cousins from Maine. Lydia smiled at that last addition. Matthias's extended family had been skeptical of their changes at first, but when their own children began manifesting unusual abilities, they'd come seeking help. And Emma and Sophia? In the gardens with the other children. Sophia's been teaching the younger ones how to control their psychic abilities, and Emma. Victoria grinned. Emma's been giving flying lessons. Flying lessons? Apparently, when you're made of living silver, the normal rules of physics become more like suggestions. Through the window, Lydia could see the group Victoria mentioned. 24 children of various ages and species, all playing together under the watchful eyes of pack members who'd volunteered to help with their care. Emma was indeed hovering about 10 feet off the ground, her silver wolf form shimmering in the afternoon sun, while Sophia sat beneath a tree with 3 smaller children gathered around her. A family. Not just her and Emma anymore, not just Matthias and Sophia, but something bigger and more wonderful than she'd ever imagined. The council meeting is tonight, Victoria reminded her. All 7 continental representatives will be attending. I know. Lydia sighed. The supernatural political landscape had shifted dramatically since the events at the mine. The Silver Luna's ability to fundamentally change other supernaturals had made her simultaneously the most respected and most feared individual in North America. Any word on the European situation? The children there are manifesting even stronger abilities. The London pack reported a 5-year-old who accidentally turned Big Ben into a flower garden. And Asia? Similar reports. But Lydia. Victoria's expression grew serious. There are also reports of something else. Adult supernaturals going missing. Entire packs vanishing overnight. Ancient bloodlines that have existed for millennia just gone. A chill ran down Lydia's spine. Gone how? That's what we need to find out. Whatever changed the children, whatever force is stirring in the supernatural world, it's not done with us yet. Before Lydia could respond, the office door burst open and Emma came flying in, literally. Her daughter landed gracefully on the carpet, her silver form shimmering back to human as she rushed to Lydia's desk. Mama. Sophia says she can see something coming. Something big and old and... Emma's face scrunched up in concentration. She says it's been sleeping for a really long time, but it's waking up because of us. Through the window, Lydia saw Sophia standing in the garden, her dark eyes fixed on something in the distance that only she could see. When she turned toward the house, her expression was troubled. Tell her I'll be right there, Lydia told Emma. As her daughter flew back out to rejoin the others, Lydia felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. She'd thought saving Emma and Sophia was the end of their story. Instead, it appeared to be only the beginning. Whatever was coming, whatever ancient force their awakening had stirred, she would face it the same way she'd faced everything else since walking into that diner bathroom 6 months ago. With love, with power, and with an absolutely unshakable determination to protect every child who needed her. Outside, the silver moon was rising, and in its light, the future glowed with infinite possibilities. Even if some of those possibilities carried teeth.